Good evening, everyone. Today is December 28th, 2022. My name is Jordan Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer behind nonconformistconscience.com, the YouTube channel that you're watching, Nonconformist Conscience, and also you can find me on Facebook and Instagram under the same name. We have such an active sky this week leading up to next week's full moon happening on January 6th in the sign of Cancer, which, as you all know, we have a lot of energy going on in the sign of Capricorn, and its polarity is Cancer, really symbolizing the need to go to the emotional body. So that's very generalized, but I will go more into this as I work my way through the transits of this week. I'm focusing mainly on Venus and what she's going to do this week because she conjuncts Mercury, then she conjuncts Pluto. Ultimately, this all happens right before she goes into the sign of Aquarius, next week on Tuesday the 2nd. We also have Mercury stationing on the 29th and then going retrograde on the 30th. And there is a lot to unpack here. There is a lot of, yin feminine energy, meaning that this even more so emphasizes the need to go within, to tap into that emotional body, to get in touch with what it is maybe you have suppressed or repressed, which is, a Capricorn dynamic. So let us begin on this week, shall we? Okay, so on the 29th, tomorrow, Mercury stations and conjuncts Venus as it is stationing. Both of these planets are in the sign of Capricorn. And anytime a planet stations, it is, it really packs a punch into the archetypal nature of what this planet is symbolizing before it goes retrograde. And as it's stationing, it's also conjunct Venus, which is Venus is all about our relationship with self and our values and our needs. And Venus transiting through the sign of Capricorn has really been giving us all an opportunity to do these really Capricorn things, like have a maturation process. That is by, going within and enacting our own natural authority. It's also by being able to, what better way to deliver on a Capricorn dynamic than to be able to meet your own needs. That is really Venus in the sign of Capricorn, to be able to take responsibility for self and to meet one's own needs. So what does this mean while Venus and Mercury are conjoined up in the sky as Mercury is stationing? Well, it speaks to really needing to understand what it is that it takes to be able to meet our own needs. You've got to remember right now, Mars is in the sign of Gemini and is retrograde until January 12th. And it is ruled by this Mercury. And so we are revisiting themes in our life as a way to learn how to understand what it is our needs are and to understand where we haven't been able to meet those needs. Both of these planets right now are ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is in the sign of Aquarius. And this is really symbolizing the need to break free from crystallized structures and prior dynamics of involving how we treat ourselves, how we are responsible or take responsibility for self, and to liberate from these prior crystallized kind of structures as a way to lay a new foundation and one that we can build upon for the long haul. This is Capricorn. And this really symbolizes Saturn stationing and Venus conjoined while this is happening, a need to really commit to oneself to continue to learn what it is that we need to do and able to take responsibility for our actions, the learning that takes place whenever we do that, and the need to really make the choice. It's Mercury, and we're dealing with Gemini as well with this Mars retrograde, to be able to make a choice about how we go about committing to ourselves and what it is that we need to do. So the following day, Mercury is going to go retrograde. And Mercury is about the linear logical mind. Whenever Mercury retrogrades, it really symbolizes and emphasizes the need to be able to go within and to ask, to trust on the intuition. It's going to more of the right brain. So it's stationing and then turning retrograde on the 30th, still conjunct the Venus and Capricorn that is now passed over it. So it is, you know, symbolizing this culmination of sorts that we've been dealing with. And really, it symbolizes, with these two planets conjoined at the time of its retrograde, the need to learn how to ask and answer one's own questions, because that enacts personal authority that is very natural. Whenever you are able to ask yourself what is right and what is wrong for yourself, and to be able to answer that instead of going with the status quo, you are really enacting, you know, natural authority. And it's natural authority over oneself, which means that this is your sovereign. You're reclaiming your sovereignty, which is what this whole, you know, earth journey is about, is being able to become self-secure, which only happens, and that's a Cancer dynamic, but it only happens whenever we enact our natural authority. So on the 31st, New Year's Eve, we have this stellium happening in Capricorn. And a stellium is whenever we have a concentration of energy in one particular sign. And this is the sign of Capricorn. We have Mercury, we have Venus, and we have Pluto. We also have the asteroid Lucifer that is also conjunct Pluto. And Capricorn is really looking at not only self-responsibility, but natural authority, breaking free of the status quo. But it can also symbolize where we become depressed. It can also symbolize where we allow self-defeating thoughts to come into our psyche and to persuade us to not to repress or to suppress something that's going on within. On this day, Pluto is going to conjunct Capricorn while Lucifer is there as well. Lucifer sounds really scary, but if you think about it, Lucifer is also the bearer of light. So it can really shine a light on what is needing to be worked on. When we look at Venus conjunct Capricorn, Pluto, we are looking at where we've reached our own limitations, where we feel very self-defeated, where we feel like we aren't able to gain our natural authority or to invoke personal responsibility about a situation. This can be dealing with work or with family as well. These are all Capricorn dynamics, or it can deal with how we are appearing into the public, our public persona. So Venus conjunct Pluto is this deep soul work of needing to really go within and to understand what it takes to commit to oneself to be able to meet one's personal needs. All of these are ruled right now by Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, which is really about shaking things up and freeing oneself of the self-defeating thoughts that may be going on right now for some of us, depending on if this is happening in a part of your own natal sky and touching planets. You may be feeling this right now, because these are all ruled by Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, we're also being able to see this in others and in the collective, and it's being projected out where others aren't being able to take personal responsibility, where others are going with the status quo, where they are not able to be a leader in their own life because they're going with what, you know, society tells them that they should do or ought to do. These are all things that we're seeing going down in the collective. It's also where we feel like time is speeding up with Saturn in direct motion and the sign of Aquarius. We can feel like, oh my gosh, there's just so much to do and not enough time. On the 31st, not only is Pluto conjunct Venus, there is a few planetary conversations that are happening between Mars, the South Node, and the Sun. And all of these planets are in direct conversation with each other. When we look at this type of conversation, it is a conversation that can induce, for those that this is really hitting a part in their chart, a place where we need readjustment. And so there can be a feeling of powerlessness or a feeling of inferiority because we don't feel like we can measure up or do what it is that we need to do. And so if there's a resistance to this friction that's going on within, an external event can be triggered as a way to help realign one. So these are things that are having to deal with being able to meet one's own needs and being able to look at the psychology and where we've reached our limits and where our motivations have been placed and what our conditioning is around getting what our needs met, getting what it is that we need met. And there is an opportunity for realignment through whatever friction may or may not be created for some. This has to deal with relationship with self. It has to deal with not buying into illusions that are self-defeating. It's really being able to relearn a whole process of recommitment. How do I enact my sovereignty? How do I meet my own needs? What is it that I need to learn about myself in order to do this? Why do I feel like I can't do this? Why and where do I feel powerless? And it can be really centered around the fear of not being able to do something that you've never done before. Maybe you're someone who is depending on others for self-validation. Maybe you're someone who is, you know, creating situations where people are dependent on you and that validates you, which both of those situations symbolize that you're not being able to meet your own needs. You're not able to self-validate. So therefore, it's really hard for one to enact, you know, a natural authority about oneself in those situations. And so really asking oneself, going within, Mercury is retrograde. It's right there with Pluto and Cap still. Going within and being able to ask oneself, what is it that I need to be doing differently? What do I need to readjust? And really invoking your higher self and knowing that these answers are not going to come from an external source. They are only going to come from within. There is also a conversation between the South Node in Scorpio and Chiron. And the South Node is ruled by this Pluto in Capricorn, and Chiron is ruled by this Mars in Gemini that is ruled by Mercury retrograde. And this really symbolizes that where we feel powerless, where we feel like we can't make a different choice, that we're going to have to invoke our own courage to be able to do so. This is about doing something different and committing to doing it differently in order for prior and cycles to not perpetuate. As this is going on, Lilith will be in the sign of Virgo. She is in a direct conversation with this. And so this is about taking things step by step and to look at where we get angry and why we get angry at our situations. Is it because you are feeling powerless? Is it because you are not answering for yourself? Is it because you are depending on others in some type of way? These are karmic, long held onto patterns that this whole conversation is symbolizing. This is really about doing something that you've never done before and being scared shitless. I mean, and those of you who watch my videos, you know that I talk about, being on the high dive and it being scary and looking down and wondering, am I going to be okay if I jump? And you free fall and you're freaking out a little bit, and then you surrender. And through the surrendering, you hit the water. You realize that you're capable of holding your breath, you're capable of diving, you're capable of swimming, and you're capable of climbing up the ladder and getting out. And this is really looking at the ways in which you can not only commit to yourself, but the ways in which you can empower yourself, right? There's so much. CAP can be about personal empowerment, and it is through taking responsibility. And so really looking at prior situations in which you haven't been able to take responsibility for certain things, whether it be yourself or whether it be situations, because there is a revisiting in order to resolve dynamic going on this week. And it is definitely in preparation for next week's full moon happening in the sign of Cancer. The conversation that I just talked about that's going on between Mars, the South Node, and the Sun, and then the South Node, and also Chiron, which is also in a conversation with Mars. This will be going on next week during this full moon as well. And so we are in a readjustment period. We are also, with the phasal relationships of everything, we are in a culminating period of time where a whole cycle of things that have to do with these inner dynamics of taking personal responsibility and meeting one's own needs and answering one's own questions for oneself instead of going outside and trying to get the answers from others is going to be enacted this whole week. There can be situations that get triggered for you to come to a deeper understanding about what it is that you need to do. For some, this can be a crisis. And what I mean by a crisis is where we feel that maybe we are disillusioned by others and their behavior, or which that happens, by the way, whenever we are depending on others, or we're only seeing the potential of a situation instead of looking at the truth. There is a must this week to look at self through honest eyes. Juno is in the sign of Pisces, where she is conjunct Neptune, and she is in a conversation with Venus this week. And this really speaks to really giving oneself grace and devoting oneself to forgiveness. Through forgiveness, we get to spiritualize. So when we take responsibility for our own actions that have led us up to this point in time in space and reality, sometimes we feel shameful about copping out on ourselves, or we feel guilt about certain situations, especially if it's revolving around not listening to oneself and not answering for oneself. This conversation between Juno and Neptune and Pisces, who's in a conversation with Venus is really about forgiving oneself for past choices. And through that forgiveness, we can learn to trust our inner voice again. And I have a great way of letting you know that you can. It's really simple. In the past, when you did not listen to yourself, the universal experience oftentimes is, had I listened to myself, I wouldn't be in this situation. So understanding that proves that it gives direct experience of knowing that you can trust yourself and that you can empower yourself to listen to your inner voice. All of this Capricorn energy, especially with Pluto, Mercury retrograde, and Venus, is very much about being able to not only answer one's own questions and to take personal responsibility, but learning how to peel back the layers of where we've been conditioned not to listen to ourselves, and how we can forgive ourselves for not, and how we can forgive others for maybe conditioning us to believe that. There's a lot of sifting through where we feel judgment towards ourselves and whether or not that's accurate or if it's conditioned. Understanding this and being objective about it gives the liberation that we're all looking for, that we're seeing with these planets being ruled by Saturn and Aquarius right now. The south node the north node is in Taurus, and it is still conjunct Uranus, who is retrograde in the sign of Taurus, which means that this is ruled by that Venus in Capricorn. And so this is really about being able to align oneself and understand one's own core needs and values, and through that to gain not only an inner maturation and inner authority, but to become self-succinct, being able to know that you can rely on yourself. It is about self-reliance, which is a Taurus dynamic. And so really understanding what our inner needs are and our inner resources, and through that, understanding and diving within to really take a look and to take responsibility of this, we gain the authority that we are looking for. And whenever we do that, the realignment is occurring. Learning how to make correct judgment that is in alignment with your own values and morals and ethics to maintain and remain in integrity is what this week is all about. The stepping stones to get there is understanding what it takes to meet one's own needs, what it takes to be self-reliant, what it takes to be responsible of one's own actions. And oftentimes what I find is the learning process that can unfold with this much Mars energy and dealing with Capricorn tying into this is that the anger that we sometimes have, that we project out onto others, is really about needing to forgive ourselves for our prior choices. And that can only come through the awareness of taking responsibility for them. When we do that, we are no longer in a victimized state. We are no longer blaming or pointing the finger at others. We are able to hold ourselves accountable. And these are all the Capricorn dynamics. So there is a lot. On the 2nd, Venus will move into the sign of Aquarius, where she is ruled then by Uranus on the north node. And interestingly enough, Uranus will be ruled by Venus. So they will be ruling each other. And this is going to symbolize the need to continuously work and the need to continuously get used to liberating oneself from its own status quo. So things are going to be happening as Venus transits through the sign of Aquarius, where we get to see where we have our own limitations. And the key is to liberate from those limitations. Anywhere we're getting too comfortable or things are getting too familiar, and it's creating a stagnation, which creates a resistance to growth and evolution. This transit with Venus through the sign of Aquarius is going to help us break through our own status quo, our own limitations. And so a mantra is going to have to be, the only thing consistent is that things are not consistent. And it's all about that, because guess what happens? When we're constantly being objective through the Aquarius lens, the Uranian lens, we are constantly able to break free from our own status quo. And this week is really preparing us for that. Before we can continue on this journey, before Venus moves into the sign of Aquarius, we have to know what it takes to meet our own needs. And then whenever she moves into the sign of Aquarius, we will get tests. You know, the universe does that to see, are you able to meet your own needs? Can you break free from your own status quo? So this can look like habitual relationship patterns, especially because whenever Pluto and Venus conjunct Lilith is going to be in the sign of Virgo and making aspect to all of this stuff. This is really about, you know, kind of being an apprentice of learning about what it takes to be able to meet one's own needs. What natural resources do I need to pull out of, you know, my bag of tricks, so that way I can continue on this journey of being able to meet my own needs? What does it take for me to survive? What inherent resources within do I have and able to do that? Where have I fallen into habitual relationship patterns where I've created dependencies either on other people or people upon me? How do I need to go about liberating myself from that and ultimately helping other people liberate from those situations as well? Where do I, or where haven't I been able to listen to myself? We are in a time of momentous transformation if we allow it. And I always say this, but you know, I have so many people right now who talk about wanting to help the collective. And the only way we can help the collective is if we're constantly confronting and challenging ourselves. And whenever Pluto conjuncts Venus on the 31st, it really sets the stage for this new year. You are going to have to constantly, just as I am, confront myself with these things revolving around personal responsibility and what we're putting out into the world. How can I do this in a socially relevant way? How can I help the collective? I know I can't help the collective if I'm not helping myself, if I'm not doing this for myself. In order to help the collective, you have to be able to walk your talk. That means you cannot give to someone else the wisdom that you don't have. And wisdom is cap. And that comes from, you know, direct experience. And with Mars retrograde and Chiron being ruled by that Mars as well, and Mars being ruled by Mercury, there is a lot going on in order for us to learn the lessons it takes to be able to walk our own talk. And what it takes is a commitment and consistency. And right now, the groundwork is being laid for this. So I hope all of you guys, you know, consciously work with this energy. If you have a lot of stuff in Capricorn, hold on. It just remember that on a soul level, we are choosing this because we're really wanting to help the collective. And so we're constantly challenging ourselves and our status quo right now as a way to help propel the collective and to help shape and change the collective value system that's going on. So there's a shedding of old values going down right now and a liberation from that is essentially needing to occur personally and for the collective. And the only way that it can change in the collective is if you start with yourself. So I hope you all have a beautiful week. I will be here every step of the way. I'm doing a class here in Oklahoma City on January 21st at the Magic Tree in the Plaza, where I'm going to be going over Pluto, the nodes, and the moon. So we're looking at the soul's journey and, you know, what it is that the soul and why it chooses to come in the way that it does. Very fundamentals about the evolutionary astrology paradigm, but they are things that they're the meat and the potatoes of it. They are things that you will be able to use and to look at to have a deeper understanding of yourself and have a deeper understanding of astrology. If you want, when we're looking at Pluto, we are looking at the soul. So, and then when we look at our moon, we're looking at our egocentric identity, and our south node and our north node play a really big role in our prior egocentric identity and what we're really shaping and moving forwards into, and how we're supposed to integrate all of it together in this lifetime, and what we're supposed to, more importantly, be actualizing in this lifetime. So if you want to know more about your chart, if you know you want to learn more astrology, I will be doing this. I have the time posted on my Facebook page for nonconformist conscience, where you can find it. It's pinned to it. It is by donation basis. And I'm looking forward to that. So I'm also going to be doing a full moon ceremony with a beautiful girl. Her name is Kristen. She runs Ikiken, and she does ceremonial cacao sessions, and I'm going to be collaborating with her on January 6th to go over the full moon happening in the sign of Cancer. So I will be posting more about that on my social media as well if you are wanting to sign up for that ceremony. I think that's it. You guys are always free to interact with me either on here or on social media. And as always, if you go to my website, you can book a session. And I want you all to be gentle with yourselves. And whenever you are feeling fear come up this week or friction about something, remember that this week is all about answering your own questions. Really tapping into this Mercury retrograde, relying on the intuition, and know that as things come up, that they are really blessings, but we're also not here to suffer. That is one of the biggest delusions that I know most people here in Oklahoma have been conditioned to think, that we must suffer in order for something good to arise. So be gentle to yourselves this week. Know that you can answer your own questions. And I will be here next week for the full moon happening in the sign of Cancer.